Returners, I know that I said that all the shirts that I'd be wearing for the rest of the month would have to do with women in horror history. And this is Jackie. This is Jackie from Love Lies Bleeding. But Jackie is women's history to me. So we're gonna have to make that exception today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Kylie, also known as Haunted Hippie, also known as the Antichrist. This is my little slice of the internet where I get to cosplay as Satan's favorite daughter. So if that's not weird to you, then you're one of my people. Click subscribe. Also click the like button and the notification bell, that way you never miss the next video. I talk all things horror on this channel. Been doing a lot of reviews lately. There's also top 10 lists and deep dives and all that other kinds of fun crap. But today we're here to talk about Ash. This is the brand new release that just came out in theaters this past weekend. A very independent little horror film that is being distributed by Shudder. Have you heard of Ash? Because I would wager a guess probably not. This was a tiny little project. Raya wakes up on a mysterious planet to discover her crewmates have been slaughtered. When a man named Brian arrives to rescue her, an ordeal of psychological and physical terror ensues. I did not see all the early reactions from South by Southwest, so I walked into this movie incredibly blind to any sort of outside opinion on it. I was stoked on the concept, but because it was a movie that I only heard about pretty recently, maybe towards the beginning of this year, maybe when I was compiling all the movies that I was most excited for, you can check out that video if you're curious about other horror releases coming out this year. I love sci-fi. This is actually listed as a sci-fi thriller, and I'm not sure why, because it goes full tilt horror. We'll get there. And don't worry, I'll give you a spoiler warning. We're doing spoiler-free thoughts now. I never saw a trailer. I really had no idea what the look and feel of the movie would be. I'd only seen the poster. And just based on a brief synopsis and the look of the poster, I knew that I was in for a sci-fi treat. I went in with, I'll be honest, moderate to high expectations. And the movie more or less met me exactly where I was at. If I had also known that it was going to be distributed by Shudder, that it would kind of feel in line with their brand of horror, then I would have altered my expectations just slightly. Because Shudder typically distributes or produces stuff that is so small and so independent, I don't know quite how to describe it, but there is a bit of a feeling of smallness. I don't know if that's the right word. There's certainly a feeling of scrappiness, and usually, you know, despite Shudder having quite a few misses, just I think due to like the no budget nature of a lot of their stuff, sometimes because of how scrappy their filmmakers have to be, they will produce like, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 absolute bangers a year. I think that Ash might be one of them. Not like a certified banger, but we'll get into all the nitty gritty of that. Now, the first act is a little bit rough. Dare I say even maybe the first half of the movie, because it sets up this mystery, and I think on paper this worked well. However, in practice, it didn't really allow me to find my footing in any type of way, and let me explain. Our lead character wakes up with amnesia. She wakes to find all this wreckage around her. So in concept, you have all these great things going on, right? She is isolated on a planet far outside of our solar system, giving alien isolation vibes. Then this other guy shows up and is part of her crew. But because she has no memory of what happened, it's hard to know, ooh, who do we trust? I really enjoy that kind of paranoia. That obviously was like borrowed from The Thing. But because she had amnesia, she also could not rely on her sense of self. And via context clues and some of the dialogue, you get the sense that she might have been somebody that was hot-headed or maybe a little bit irrational. So I don't know, in theory, I like that idea where you don't know what happened, you don't know who to trust, and you can't rely on your sense of self to ground you. That obviously sounds like a nightmare, but I just think practically, I was like, okay, well then where do I stand at all as an audience member? It really just leaves the door open for literally anything to be the truth. And I think that's just a little bit less fun for me, because I prefer for a mystery to unravel via little context clues, and then slowly we gradually get to the big picture. This was kind of like, we didn't know what was going on for a lot of the time, and quite a bit of like the first half of the movie felt just a little bit rambling, just a little bit bumbling, just a little bit too much wandering, if you know what I mean. When we get to the last act of the movie is really when I was sold. So unfortunately, yes, I do think that like that took a little bit too long. The payoff was definitely worth it for me. Now, it is quite a derivative piece, but I don't always mind that. I really am not against people just making something in a genre that they love. I do not need, especially newer directors, to be reinventing the wheel on anything. That's fine. I don't mind being reminded of classic films if I think that the movie is doing a good enough job on its own of sort of putting its own stamp on it. I don't know how much this movie necessarily does that, just in terms of like borrowed body horror elements and stuff. I'll get more into that in spoilers. But certainly the artistic flair on it is something extremely different to any Alien movie, to The Thing. It's extraordinarily psychedelic. I loved that, and that is probably the main reason why I will recommend that you see this in theaters. This movie definitely would not have been as effective for me at home. I know that with certainty. The sound mixing is incredible. Also, the director, his stage name is Flying Lotus, so slay. He also did the score, and the music is so unique. It's so gorgeous. I think that's another thing that really sets it apart. Also, when they start to get down to it with the body horror, they used a lot of prosthetics, they used puppets, and even the VFX I thought looked really good. I mean, it looked better than the Electric State. Maybe that's just because everything about the Electric State conceptually was stupid. That might be why I feel that way, but regardless, that opinion stands. In those moments, this movie had the sauce. The payoff of those moments were worth the price of admission for me personally, so I was a very happy camper. I don't know if there's a world in which I give this movie above a 3.5 star rating out of 5. For me, that's a very serviceable movie. I had a good time. However, there were at least 2 or more factors kind of holding me back. That's what a 3.5 is for me. I think I would probably rewatch it, but I am a little bit held back by the derivative nature of it. I went to an early screening and there was a Q&A afterwards that was live streamed, and the director was talking about how he tried not to be influenced by Alien every day, but you can tell he was a lot of the time. One moment in particular is kind of part of the climax, and it's like, oh, this was done better within the Alien franchise, but it's okay. And also because it borrows so heavily from The Thing, it's like, it's hard when it borrows that much because you can't make another The Thing. He also cites other movies that he was inspired by, especially for the color palette, being Suspiria, King, and Amelie. He also is a big fan of Terry Gilliam. So for me personally, inspirations were a little bit too heavy at times, but for the most part, that's not something I mind too much. For me, honestly, it just was kind of how slowly paced the first half of the movie was. I don't mind a slow pace, but it's the fact that it got kind of repetitious, and repetition is just not for me. But overall, a great blend of different facets of filmmaking, really interesting visuals, great score, really good acting, themes about trust in oneself, I think were presented well. I don't know that they were super fleshed out because the movie kind of goes in a predictable direction, but also with themes that it was clear that they didn't want to flesh out and explore. They kind of just got to be these like looming horror elements, but they were really existential things. For example, the reason why they're on that planet to begin with, it has to do with the environmental horrors of Earth no longer being a habitable planet. So even though it's not an environmental horror movie, that's just looming over you the whole time. It's looming over the characters. So there's plenty there to craft a really great atmosphere, and sometimes it's just nice to like sit back and enjoy a good atmosphere. Did it get a little bit too jump scare heavy sometimes in the first act? Yes, like I said, it was a bit repetitious. The first couple times it really worked. You know, they start the movie with a bang, but then they keep doing it, and it's like, okay, let's maybe save this for that third act payoff. Overall, a solid recommend. I think that it's really important to try to go see this movie for yourself to form your own opinion. Don't be put off by all the early reactions from South by Southwest. It wasn't until after I watched the movie that I got on Letterboxd and I saw like half-star reviews, 1-star reviews. I saw one review of someone that walked out of the movie in the middle of the movie at South by Southwest. A lot of people hated this movie inexplicably. Like, I wish that more of those reviews were more detailed because I'm like, why? I just don't think it's a movie worth hating. Some people did explain it was because, oh, thanks for just reminding me of other better movies I could be watching. I think personally that this type of extreme mindfuck body horror stuff is just simply not for most people. And I wish that people could just say that, because this movie is absolutely not deserving of a half-star review. It's a perfectly serviceable, if not kind of recognizable storyline, but then also has a lot of artistic flair and flavor to it. So in my opinion, more than worth the price of admission. Give it a shot. I would say give it a shot. But, you know, hopefully I've also kind of set your expectations up in the proper way, because yeah, there are certain people that it's like they'll hear about it and they should just know better that, hey, that's not going to be for me. I'm going to start getting into my spoiler thoughts now, so if you're interested in this movie, which I think you should be, then you should probably head out. In the beginning of the movie, we wake up with Raya, and immediately I know I'm in for a treat with the visuals because it's so colorful. I feel like Shudder is one of the only studios that still supports movies not having disgustingly bland monochromatic looks. Immediately we wake up with her and there is color, but but she is super disoriented. So right off the bat, there's blammo, some jump scares with like melting faces and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just... That's me putting my seatbelt on. I'm buckled in. And it's clear that she's very sick. Like, something is definitely off about her. She starts wandering through this station and she's finding dead bodies, presumably her old crew members. And I think in the very beginning, she is starting to get just these really brief sort of flashes of visuals of violence. Then, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes after her wandering for quite a bit, Brian comes in, played by Aaron Paul, who I guess is from Breaking Bad. Unbelievably, my non-cinephile partner had to tell me who he was. He was like, oh, what movie are you going to see? And I said, Ash. And he said, oh, starring Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad, for those quite unfamiliar with TV. Here's where the movie might start to play with your own biases, whatever you've taken into the movie with you. Because Brian keeps telling Raya pretty repeatedly that even though she has amnesia, she's lost her memory of whatever's gone on, he's like, you haven't changed. You're still acting like you. And it seems like he's implying that she's rather unpredictable or that she's hot-headed or has caused them problems in the past. So he's like, we need to get out of here. We need to, you know, figure out when the next lineup is and just shoot out of here, baby. And she's like, but the crew is dead. Like, I need to know what happened to everyone. And if we leave, I'm not going to figure that out. They do a pretty cool little futuristic body scan on her and they figure out that she has some swelling in the brain that's like causing her fever. It's causing her memory loss. But as we work our way through the second act and stuff, it becomes clear that these flashbacks she's having are indicating that she committed this violence. This wasn't extremely engaging to me because I just thought that it was the movie displaying all of its cards way too early. Neither of them really seemed trustworthy. They were showing a lot from these flashbacks, so it was like, okay, she committed this violence, but clearly something else is afoot because he's also acting weird. Now I think on a rewatch, it'll feel more clever to me because I just sort of had the wrong idea. But I did know, I think ultimately by his weirdness, that she would be exonerated somehow. Also because it's only the second act, it's like we need to have somewhere to go. I guess that's what I was referring to earlier, where when you can't trust anyone, it's just like, okay, well, anything can happen. I shouldn't really be too invested in any sort of fragments of this storyline. And then also it kind of starts to become a little bit too obvious. That was my issue with the first half. But then we have a payoff in the third act where we finally get the whole truth. It's kind of a weird setup for the plot. I think I almost would have preferred that it didn't start with this whole amnesia situation because I easily could have seen myself getting invested in these other really interesting and really likable characters, but we only ever get to meet them through these flashbacks, which is annoying. So the third act, it's essentially like one large flashback for the first half of it, where we discover that there is indeed an alien parasite. I really wanted to say earlier that a huge inspiration for this movie felt like Life from 2017. That movie is not something that really gets talked about because it's just it's one big alien ripoff, but I think it has its own personal stamp on it just with the nature of Calvin. The alien itself is much different to the xenomorphs, and so it gives the movie its own distinct flavor, plus the cast is really good. Like, I enjoy Life a lot. The creature, and it came to be known as a weasel on set. They didn't call it that in the movie, but I'm gonna call it a weasel because that's what they called it during the post-screening Q&A. The weasel reminded me exactly of Calvin, but it also was like a zombie parasite. I loved this so much. One of my favorite ways that it got into the host's body was through the nose. This was an entirely practical moment, and I feel like you could have told me that it was VFX and I'd believe you because it just looked that seamless. They described in that moment how they had the prosthetic of one of the actors' heads, and then also they puppeteered the weasel to go through his nose, and that the cast and crew on set were all like super disturbed and grossed out the day they shot that. Also, during the Q&A, they went on this whole kind of tirade together about which orifice would be the worst for the weasel to crawl up into, and then there ended up being like at least 5 minutes of talk of what if a weasel went up your butthole. They talked about buttholes a whole lot, and then I think that they ultimately settled on the worst orifice that it could go into is the male pee hole. I'm quoting them. They said male pee hole, and I don't think you could really argue with that. My first thought would probably be your eye, but let's tangent over. These scenes in particular where the other characters were possessed by the weasel reaffirmed my feeling that I really wanted to get more from these actors in other scenes. But had they done that and had they not structured the plot like this amnesia mystery, it would have been so clear cut that it was an Alien ripoff, I think that would have posed a lot more problems for them with like early reactions and stuff. But that basically is what it is at the end of the day. It's just like packaged in a different plot structure. These other actors were so goddamn talented at being possessed. The physicality of their roles, I thought that they crushed it. Also hats off to the stunt people when they would clock in. Those were the moments that made me go, yeah, this movie has the sauce. It doesn't always, but when you have possessed zombie dead person with alien in their brain playing puppet, when they have him sitting up in the background like Michael Myers, yeah, sign me up. My favorite one of those performances was from Beulah Quale. Let me know if I can improve that pronunciation. But I was like, oh, I want to see him as a Deadite, I think. Put him in the next Evil Dead movie, okay? My source? Trust me, bro. I'm just kidding. It's this movie. Watch Ash, and then you'll be like, yes, I agree. In the end, I was a fan of kind of the larger reveal that she had been possessed by one of these parasites for the entire time, or rather the parasite. There's only one that's jumping from body to body, and it got into her via this little cut she had on her head. It was nasty, nasty, nasty. We have seen this before in life with Calvin going in through people's mouths and stuff, but when the effects are as good as they are in Ash, I don't mind. Successful gross out moments, and when it went into her head, yep, that was another one. Here comes the really big derivative alien moment, though. I know that a lot of it already has been up to this point, but if you haven't seen Prometheus, you need to, first of all. Look, I don't care what the people say, it is my favorite movie in the Alien franchise. I'm usually not even that big of a nihilism person, but I just think that thematically it's explored so perfectly in Prometheus. That's why I love it so much, and then also the body horror is just fantastic and all the effects. Anyway, if you haven't seen that, then I guess you're good to go on this review. There's not that much else to cover from this movie, but she very much has her Prometheus moment where she extracts the alien from her body. Nothing is gonna top this scene in Prometheus. It's just so layered and unique. My favorite touch about it is that there isn't even an option to get an abortion on this super futuristic high-tech machine. In one of the most dire circumstances of her entire life, she has to take the extra steps to get this foreign body removed from her.
I need cesarean. Error. This medpod is calibrated for male patients only.
And in Ash, it's just not that, you know? But I can't begrudge them that because they were working with a fraction of the cost of Prometheus. So with what they had, I thought that it was an effective scene. It effectively really grossed me out. Thought it was really well done. Thought the effects looked great. But I understand that that's going to turn a lot of people off because the scene is... It's quite a copycat. There's no way around that. And from there, predictably, she's a great final girl. I do really like her, but she gets off the planet. Yay. Though I do think her future is really uncertain because I don't know that she can necessarily go back to Earth because they've used up all the resources there. Pretty sure that was alluded to in the dialogue, but that is also very original Alien, 1979. Oh, you'll notice maybe it seems like I didn't really get into much of a plot. It's because there's not that much of one. A good amount of the time is spent in flashbacks. I guess if you didn't watch the movie and you want me to explain, she ended up having to kill people because they were possessed by this alien, and then it jumped into her and caused her memory loss. And then it was actually making her hallucinate Brian because Brian had died, and so I think was kind of manipulating her to get off the planet so that it could go and, I don't know, spread itself or just get the humans off the planet. Because at one point, while it's inside of her brain, there's this really cool psychedelic moment where it's speaking to her and it's like, this is our planet, we were here first, this is our investment, like, you need to leave. But I have my suspicions because it was literally in her brain that it also wanted to spread and maybe take over other planets. I don't know. Because it was a parasite. That's just my fun little headcanon. But yeah, not a lot of plot because there's kind of just a lot of bumbling around, a lot of flashbacks. Also, a lot of kind of like side quests. Like at one point, she goes to like fix a hole in the ship because the atmosphere outside doesn't have enough oxygen. So that's just a little side quest. And then she starts having flashbacks and stuff while she's doing that. It's just a lot of the side quests, they're not interesting. It doesn't really have anything to do with the main storyline. So that's that. I quite enjoyed myself. Let me know your thoughts on Ash if you've seen it. I have a feeling that like nobody's gonna go see it right now, but then once it drops on Shudder, then everyone will probably start talking about it. And I'm sorry, I don't know when it's releasing digitally. Anyway, hopefully most of the people that are still here right now did go see the movie in theaters. Overall, in summation, I am excited about Flying Lotus. The craftsmanship on display with so little resources was just astounding. Even if it didn't reinvent the wheel, I thought that it was just a perfectly serviceable little genre flick, full of the conventions we love, while kind of subverting some of them. And I'm excited about all the people involved. I am stoked to see what they do next. If you want more reviews like these, you can check them out. There's a big old playlist on this channel. And if you like physical media, I also have a second channel, and that's usually what I talk about over there. And I have a Patreon where, depending on which tier you join, you get a bonus video every single week, usually at least once a month. Those bonus videos consist of like hour-long podcast episodes with my dad. We talk about movies too, so check it out. Check out my socials. Also consider donating to my next short film campaign. That's right, I'm a little filmmaker myself. My other short films are listed down below if you want to check that out before donating. Totally get it. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye.